All right, so this is my 10-second countdown for Metro Network. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. Welcome to, this is Councilwoman Kathleen Murphy. Welcome to my community meeting on March 3rd, 2022. It is 6 p.m. regarding legislation that I have filed, BL 2021 621. It deals with historic overlay and notices to neighbors in historic conservation overlays. So I don't have really a set agenda for this meeting and wanted to just kind of tell y'all my legislative intent and the kind of process we've gone through to get here. And then I'm happy to kind of open it up to questions and discussions and things like that. So going back a little bit, I've been in office for almost 7 years now. The first 2 years of this term, I was on the Planning Commission. And obviously, on the Planning Commission, there is a lot more required notice and things for that. And then also have become a little bit of the sign legislator when it comes to sign and notice and transparency when it comes to the council. And so I passed some legislation maybe a year, 2 years ago at this point, and it was about the Stormwater Committee. And what I had found is that the Stormwater Committee did require signs for variance requests, but they did not mail letters. And it dawned on me here at my own personal home, a property across the street was requesting a variance. And the people it would really affect were the people downstream from them, but they were on their neighborhood is not connected to my neighborhood because the creek literally divides us. So they would never see the sign or notice. And so, unless they were driving the neighborhood or watching the stormwater committee postings, which I mean, not a lot of people are clued into those or on those email lists all the time, then they wouldn't have any idea of it. And so Stormwater actually has given me feedback. I spoke with them today actually at their committee, and the feedback they've given me is that they actually have more involvement from the community because of the signs and notices, and they have more context when making their decisions, which I think is really important and helpful, not just for transparency, but to make sure our boards and commissions are making the best decision for us. So we started this process. I had a community meeting, well, a kind of a council community meeting with other committee or other council members where we talked about what do we think needs to be noticed, what do we think doesn't need to be noticed when it comes to historic and conservation overlays. We also, I know that one of the big draws and kind of a selling point of overlays is that there's no cost to the permit. There's no cost to the applicant seeking to alter their property in some way. And so when weighing kind of the cost benefit of transparency of committees to neighbors and the cost of, if the applications were extremely expensive the way that they are at planning, where a planning application for an SP can be, in the thousands of dollars, I feel like we've maybe struck a good balance here. So the legislation in its current form, if you received my email, I had links to it. In its current form, we are in the second substitute. And then Council Lady Allen has an amendment that I'll be adding on. So in the current second substitute, what I've done is I took some language from Raleigh-Durham where they have a much more robust list out there of what projects are considered major and minor work, what goes before their historic commission and what does not. And so I tried to model it after them, but really couldn't get that language very clear for what we wanted to have noticed or not noticed. So what Council Lady Allen is proposing, and I will accept as a friendly amendment, is it will refer to the historic commission's rules and guidelines, which their commission has voted upon, and their rules and guidelines set apart what goes before the commission and what can be administratively reviewed. So things that can be administered or approved for administrative review would not require signs and notices under the legislation that will be before the council in 2 weeks. But things that do go up before the commission for that review and to be presented and to be voted on and discussed in a public hearing would require a sign very similar to the signs you see for the BZA, for planning and zoning, for stormwater, and they would also be required to send letters within 200 to 250 feet of the property. So that is smaller than the requirement for the Board of Zoning Appeals and for a rezoning, but I think it is important that it is more than just the adjacent properties, because currently it's just adjacent properties for historic setbacks. I just felt like more notice needed to be out there. The commission did feel like 11 days was the proper notice amount in advance, given their timeline of how they review projects and things like that. So we are at the sign would go up 11 days before, and letters would have to be out at least 11 days prior to the commission. So those letters and that signage would be prepared very similar to the way BZA and planning letters are. It would, in stormwater, it would direct you to the website, the historic tracking website, which is very similar to the development tracker, if you're familiar with that. I think the historic version is a little underused, so I'm hoping that this might create some more traffic over to there. Because the reality of it is that while we have some neighborhoods and some communities who have overlays, and their neighborhood association is very active in watching the agenda when it comes out, the truth of the matter is not every neighborhood has a neighborhood association or has a neighborhood association that's involved in the overlays. So, the burden should not just be on the neighborhood association. So Steve just put a comment in the box asking me if this is for historic or conservation. So this would be for any preservation permits going before the commission. So that would be whether you're in a historic overlay or a conservation overlay. This doesn't touch the other overlays such as contextual. Sorry, I couldn't think of that word. Contextual is the other overlay. That is more of a planning matter and does not go before historic. So this would be just permits in overlays that go before the Historic Zoning Commission. All other things, like in a contextual overlay, that's governed by the Planning Commission and would be up to them. So from here, I know that a lot of people in the conversations that I've had, there are other issues that and concerns that people have about the historic commission, the historic department, so on and so forth. And I know I can't fix all of those concerns, but I think this is the council's attempt at trying to at least get more transparency in the process and people knowing about decisions or things going before the commission ahead of time rather than afterwards. So from here, I'm really just leaving it open to answer questions or hear critiques or comments about the legislation and see if there are other things that need to be tweaked. If it's outside the scope of this legislation, then what I guess I'll request is that you just send me an email and I'll kind of keep a tally of that and explore those things after we get through with this legislation if it doesn't fit this caption. So if you have a question, I'm not sure if you can if y'all raise your hand in this way. It's been a minute since I've used WebEx, but I think you should have the ability to unmute yourself, and there's only 8 of us on here, so feel free to just unmute yourself and let me know your thoughts. And Mr. TSLA host, I don't see your name, so that's what I have for you.
I couldn't figure out how to change my name. I use WebEx for work.
Oh, that's
My name is Chuck Sherrill, and I just this is my introduction to this legislation. I hadn't looked at it until this meeting. Is it fair to say that the intent of the legislation is that more people in an area would be informed if there is a historic overlay when something is being considered in terms of a change that affects that, and that the intent of the amendment was merely to clarify and simplify the process?
Yes, the amendment that Council Lady Allen has clarifies what what would be signage or not. So in the rules, and let me go ahead and share this screen. I think you should be able to see this in front of you. So these are the Historic Zoning Commission rules, and what they have in them, and this is on their website, and I'm happy, I don't know if I put this link in the email or not, but you can hopefully see on my screen where it says commission review, and then down below it says administrative review. So Berkeley's amendment kind of takes out where I had tried to describe in the legislation administrative versus commission, and hers just kind of points to this, because again, the commission may need to change this list depending on new trends that are going on in Nashville. And so I didn't want to necessarily have the notice tied, hands kind of tied to, if this changes, we have to change the legislation as well.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Right. Randy, do you want to?
Sure. Hi, Councilmember Murphy. I had a question, a general comment that I'm very supportive of the concept of this, and had a question to clarify about the amendment, and then another comment and some context. Berkeley Allen's amendment would only change the requirement about the signage, not the notification by mail of neighbors. Am I correct in that?
No, so the first in Berkeley's amendment, which, let me share the screen. Okay, so this should be Berkeley's amendment. At the top, I hope you can see where it says Allen amend to BL 2021. Is that hopefully what you see? So this first section is about the mail notices, the letters mailed. And then the second section is about the signage. So her amendment points to, if it is going before the commission, it has letters and signs.
Okay. As opposed to administrative approval, and they can't just administratively approve a completely new construction or a major renovation.
One moment.
Am I correct
We'll
in
go
thinking
back.
that?
Yes. So, if I can get the right one up. Okay. Do you see the, it says historic zoning rules at the top of this file?
Right. I read that when you,
Okay, good.
and then the administrative.
So under administrative review, it has demo of things that look like non-contributing, scrolling down. So it does look like they can do new construction of outbuilding and detached accessory units, which meet the guidelines, are at least 3 feet from property lines, 5 feet from rear when the garage faces the rear, 3 feet when no garage facing rear. So that would be the only new construction. So it would be new construction of outbuildings and dados, not like a new construction of an entire home.
Okay. Um, I'm generally in favor of more notification than less, including dados. And I will kind of think through that. But in general, I think there's a great need for more notification, and therefore this bill, happy to come, if there's a public hearing and speak on behalf of it. Some of the problems we've encountered in my neighborhood in Cherokee Park, we've had 3 houses in our neighborhood and one now that's going up in the adjacent neighborhood right near Wilson, North Wilson, that was approved without, it didn't require public notification. It's new construction. They approved it. And now that it's mostly up and it's taking shape, the neighbors over there are very upset about it. It doesn't look at all like it belongs in a conservation zoning neighborhood. It looks more like a ski lodge. And people are upset because there was no notification about it. I happen to live next to, as you know, a house that was approved that way, and it did not. The house itself, they built a dadu later that came under a separate hearing, but there was no hearing or notification about the house. And a lot of neighbors were so upset and complained. It looks like a giant Mediterranean house in the middle of a neighborhood full of old Elizabeth Tudor style houses, that several of them called the vice mayor, and he came out and looked at it. And when I talked to him, literally the first thing out of his mouth was, "Who approved that?" pointing to the house. And then he said, "Whoever approved that should not be approving projects in conservation zoning neighborhoods." And so for that reason, a number of people in the neighborhood have felt like their decisions seem kind of arbitrary and capricious. There was a project over in East Nashville that we were familiar with because our daughter lives next to it, and we own the property, where they were going to require them to tear down an addition that they had started on, that was, pardon my expression, but a gnat fart compared to what they've done over here in some of the projects in this neighborhood in terms of conforming with the zoning. They allow things that it's like they strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. And I think if the neighbors were better informed, certainly the project going up over next to North Wilson, they would have come out and opposed that at the hearing. And I think that would have made a difference. They told us when neighbors over in East Nashville on Douglas Avenue all mobilized and came out on behalf of our neighbor, that was the only reason they granted relief from what they had intended in that project. And so I think, one, we need that. And if I may add one more, I think we need an additional bill at some point that changes the appeal process for historic zoning decisions. Right now, the only way you can appeal it is to take it to Chancery Court, which is going to be an insurmountable barrier for a lot of people in a lot of neighborhoods. And that just seems like a terrible way to do it. I'd like to, as a next step beyond this bill, see that change too.
Yeah, Randy, I actually have a neighbor in Richland, West End, who has been disapproved for their plans. We're told to come back with different plans. And they brought those plans back, and the commission told them, well, staff told them, you've added on too many times, so this will be disapproved as well. And not having the ability to appeal that other than Chancery Court is frustrating. And that's one thing that I was inspired when researching this legislation in Raleigh. They do have another appeal process beyond Chancery Court. And very similar to like the way if you're disapproved at the Planning Commission here in Nashville, separate. I mean, this is different than Raleigh. If you're disapproved at the Planning Commission, you can still move on to council to override. But that's something I have not gotten into the weeds on to see what constitutionally we can and can't do in that regard. And so that is on my to-do list. Maybe I shouldn't keep saying this to people, but I keep saying I've got a year and a half left. So let's get all the legislation in that we can. I might have too much on my dance card, but Randy, I think you hit the nail on the head when I saw that. in Raleigh. I was like, that's something that I need to find out what the state does and does not allow us to do. And I have talked to some senators who we've discussed historic preservation legislation already. So if that needs to be changed, I have primed that pump and with my other hat, my day job on. So it's good to hear that somebody else is concerned in that. So
Yeah,
Grace, do
I
you want to?
appreciate
Oh,
that.
sorry. Yeah.
No, I appreciate this bill and then, you know, the next step beyond that.
Yeah, if we can get there, I'm happy to look into it. Grace?
I support this bill, and in addition to the, change to the appeal process, because, I mean, that actually seems like it might be a constitutional issue of, I don't know, of some sort, because only having the only appeal be Chancery Court is cost prohibitive for 95% of people who live in Nashville. So it really means you have no access to an appeal, and that seems like that should be a non-starter, even, to people who think everything that Metro Historic Commission does is absolutely outstanding. The other prospective bill, DADUs should not be administratively approved. They are too big and too close to the property line, and the restrictions on them are considerably less than they are in historic and conservation zones than they are on the primary residence. And for all of those reasons, that review process should require notification, and it should go before the commission and be more robust.
And Grace, I realized after we just looked at this, I also saw in here that there are some DADUs that do require commission review. Where did I see that on here? So under D, so it's new. Sorry, I have a new laptop and I'm having trouble figuring out how to highlight things sometimes. So
I'm glad I'm not, it's nice that someone 25 years younger than me occasionally has technological problems.
I'm gonna have to sit down on some weekend and spend some time with this. So it does say new construction of outbuildings unless the project meets so on and so forth, that ordinance. So I'll have to look at that a little bit closer.
Right.
I do think another step of this legislation may be that while the historic commission right now determines what is administrative and what is commission approved, the next conversation may also be spelling that out more clearly. Taking when I've talked to some East Nashville neighbors, they expressed some concern over the gray area that is still in those rules of the commission. And I don't think we necessarily want to get in the position of the council dictating that, but at least
No.
maybe a resolution requesting that there be more clarity there. I don't want to get too far into this bill, but I think that's the next conversation that we need to have.
No, this bill accomplishes, my one concern about this bill is I assume that is 11 actual calendar days and not 11 business days.
So as written, it says at least 11 days. I do not recall off the top of my head if days is defined in this section of the code already, but I will make it. We still have time to tweak
Right.
this amendment if needed. And so I can,
If it's business days, I think that's fine, because that's basically, 2 business weeks. That gives people actual time. We got such a notification, and it was mailed by certified mail, and literally we got it 3 days before, and we needed to hire a lawyer, and, there were all these things that we needed to do. We had absolutely no time to do that. The notice was incorrect. It had the wrong address for the meeting. We almost missed the meeting and didn't even get to, everything about the process did not go right. And, you need, if indeed there is a purpose for notification, which is to give people a chance to say, I want some input, or I'm concerned about drainage, or I'm concerned about this or that. You need time to be able to, respond and get that meeting on your calendar and actually attend it. And, if, 11 days is better than 0, which is what we have now, but 11 business days would be much better.
And that's where I think because the council and I did go back and forth on whether signs and letters were necessary.
Right.
Can we do one or
Right.
the other? And so I do think having the sign, so even if, there is a USPS issue with getting it to
Right.
11 days, we at least have, we've got the sign up in the 11 days.
Right.
Thank you for bringing that up. I will double check in the code and see if days is already defined in this section. And
Right.
if it's not, I'll copy whatever else is, I'll have that clarified before I'll ask Council Lady Allen. I'll have the staff ask her if she's willing to define that, or I'll do another amendment to define days.
Thanks. That's it for me.
Great. Thank you. Glad to have your household on board. And I assume the cat too. The cat's on board too. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments or anything on this? Okay. Well, thank you all for joining. In that email, I did put a link for if people had feedback and were unable to attend. That link will stay good and up until through the next council meeting. The next council meeting, I do plan on moving this forward to third reading with the amendments. And I will find out about the days definition and get that drafted up or tweaked if needed. And if anything else comes up between now and then, please feel free to either fill it out on that survey or just email me directly. And please, if you have time, please email the council and let them know that you support the bill. Again, the bill number is BL2021 621. So if y'all are in support of it, please email them and let them know. If you are not in support of it, email them and let them know. That's the only fair thing for me to say. So thank you all so much for attending tonight. I appreciate the feedback and have a good evening.